Well, good morning and welcome to Frankly Speaking, broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio here on Market Street in Corning. I'm so glad that you joined us this morning. I'm your host, Frank Ackerman. We are going to talk about DNC Night 3. Did you watch? What did you think of the now vice presidential nominee accepting the nomination last night? Walz, he's in it. Tim Walz, his son, very emotional. It was a short speech. Also, we heard from Bill Clinton, Nancy Pelosi, others. We're going to talk about it in depth this morning. And we're also going to hear from Don Burlew, the president of Watkins Glen International, talk a little bit about Go Bowling and talk a little bit about the vintage races, the Vintage Grand Prix this weekend. That's in the 7 o'clock hour. Let's start with a comment from after yesterday's broadcast. Good afternoon, Frank. Yes, it was in the afternoon. Good afternoon, Frank, my friend. What is your opinion on Republican Mike Walz? Walz. I'm trying to get it right. I don't want you to get confused with Tim. Walz. This is Mike Waltz, like the Tennessee Waltz. I'm a veteran and he makes sense. What is your opinion? I love your positive commentary. God bless you and your family. Well, thank you. That's so nice of you. So kind of you to say. He has been on fire lately. First of all, he wrote a piece, and it made its rounds yesterday, right? Yeah, a couple days ago, I suppose now, saying that the Biden-Harris's original mistake resulted in global chaos. The catastrophic withdrawal from Afghanistan by President Biden and Vice President Harris was the original sin of their administration. It was a microcosm of everything that has gone wrong over the past 4 years, and their leadership failures likely marked the beginning of the end of their administration. First, there was the gaslighting, the urging the public not to believe its eyes about the magnitude of the collapse. What made the gaslighting even worse for Biden was it was so transparently absurd and insulting. The terrorist attack ultimately took the lives of 13 service members. The scenes of Afghans tragically falling from planes to their death and American helicopters abandoning our embassy will forever be brandished in school textbooks. The families are not going to go away, and we cannot unsee the photographs. I'm not sure. I agree with Representative Waltz, except for I'm not sure it'll be in textbooks, unfortunately. But call me jaded. And there was also the horrifying moral collapse and evil visited upon the gold-starred families whose sons and daughters died in the botched withdrawal during a suicide attack at the Abbey Gate entrance to Kabul International Airport. President Biden could not help but repeatedly look at his watch during the dignified transfer ceremony held for the 13 service members who were killed during that attack. The strategic failure will be the most far-reaching, unfortunately, and far outlived Biden and Harris. Bagram Air Base was the only major U.S. base strategically sandwiched between Iran, China, and Russia. Keep that in mind. America simply gave away a strategic foothold that will cost us dearly should a greater global conflict arise in our future. I'm glancing through this. This is about a 3-page opinion piece. You can find it for yourself if you want to read the whole thing, but it's a fantastic piece to the viewer's point about Mike Waltz. He represents Florida's 6th congressional district, by the way. He's a combat decorated Green Beret, retired Army National Guard colonel, and veteran of the war in Afghanistan. He finishes his piece by saying, unwinding the Biden-Harris administration's record of fecklessness and disaster in Europe, the Middle East, Asia, and elsewhere will take time for a new Trump administration. Their humiliation in Kabul, with those Afghans falling from the airplanes and carelessness at home, with insults to the families, will take time to mend. The damage to our military and to the world from Afghanistan was immense and has never properly been addressed. If there is justice in the world, however, the coming election will allow us to do just that. And also to the viewer's point, he was one of the service members, Republican veterans in Congress, one of 50, who condemned Tim Walz's military service lies. In the letter, which was released as Walz, ready to deliver remarks at the DNC, said the office of the vice president is a position that requires the trust of the American people and a solemn commitment to duty on behalf of the United States of America. As veterans, who have served our nation, we feel compelled to address your erroneous misrepresentations and urge you to come clean to the American people. Repeatedly claiming to be a retired command sergeant major when you did not complete the requirements was not honorable, nor was it honorable to claim to carry weapons in war when you had not served in war. And abandoning the men and women under your leadership just as they were getting ready to deploy was certainly not honorable either. To be blunt, when you falsely claim military service that did not happen and abandon your post, you diminish the real sacrifices made by veterans who did serve in combat. It was an impactful, forceful letter to the now Democrat vice presidential nominee, Tim Walz. And one of the people, and we can go through the whole list, but it's 50 people, so I'm not going to, but I did happen to notice, just to that viewer's point, that, of course, Representative Waltz was a part of signing on to this, So I hope that answers your question, viewer. Thank you. And thank you for the waves coming in. Okay. What did you think of last night's DNC Night 3? A lot to dissect, and we are going to get to it. We'll talk about the protests as well. We do have some things here about the Trump campaign I think you're going to find interesting. One of them being, and I know it's been widely reported, that it looks as if RFK Jr. is going to drop out of the race today, or on Friday, and perhaps even endorse Trump. What's interesting about that is it will take a tiny bit of the quote-unquote momentum away from Harris, who is giving her speech tonight, if this is to happen. Harris's speech tonight will be lauded as probably the most historic generation defining speech ever given. Many of the media already have their post-speech articles written up to talk about how moving it was, how important it was, how it keeps the momentum alive, how there's now joy in the party, there's excitement, there's momentum. So be prepared for that. And tomorrow on the program, you'll want to tune in very, very early, because we have and this is a good thing, we have very little time to talk about it because we have two guests tomorrow. Some of them, Phil Palmisano, will be joining us in the 7 o'clock hour. We've not talked to Phil in quite a while. We will talk with him about the DNC as well. But we'll also have some guests in from Sweeney Todd to talk about their opening night, and that their opening night is tomorrow. So I said, yes, of course you can come on the program. So that we will have two guests, but we will have plenty of time. And I think the most important part, and I've been saying this all week long, the most important part is to hear your commentary. So maybe it's after the debate, you send it in and I read it in the morning, or maybe it's during and I will talk to Phil and say, hey, Phil, the last segment of the show, we're going to read all the comments of what people had to say either to Phil or about the DNC, the final night, and Harris's speech. So keep that in mind. It's going to be a jam-packed show tomorrow, like it is going to be today as well. I just wanted to pass that along. But yes, RFK Jr. is going to address the nation as he weighs whether to drop out and endorse Trump. Now, what's interesting is he's going to make that speech in Phoenix tomorrow morning. And again, it's not known whether or not he's going to drop out. That's what's being speculated. But Trump is holding a rally of his own, and it happens to be in Arizona Friday evening. Just something to keep in mind. Okay. We're going to move fast this morning. Did you see, and this is going to tie in with the protests that are happening at the DNC, but the October 7th mastermind, he's the Hamas leader. I'm going to try to pronounce his name here. Yahya Sinwar. We know him as Sinwar. And very rarely have I mentioned his first name, Yahya. He previously has claimed that it would be an honor to die fighting Israel. Now we learn he has made his own survival a condition of any ceasefire in Gaza. Well, I guess if he could put it in there, hey, don't kill me. Sinwar allegedly emphasized that his safety must be guaranteed and that Israel must not try to kill him. That's what a senior Egyptian official told Ynet. Sinwar insists a guarantee that his safety and security are assured, the official said. So much for honor or death before dishonor. Anyway, kind of changing his tune now that he sees Israel knocking at his doors and seeing the past attacks, successful attacks by Israel. We're going to talk about, as Van Jones put it, that marbling in the Democratic Party of anti-Semitism. When we come back, that is going to tie in with, obviously, the speakers. It was a big kind of, would you say, pop culture night. Oprah spoke. You had a lot of musical performances. And I can't remember who asked it in the New York Post, and I hope that we can get to it towards the end, but is the long, drawn-out convention, meaning how much time they're spending, how late it's going into the night, are people still watching? Is that getting frustrating for people? I know there was many people that took it upon themselves to watch the show to say, you know what, I'm going to watch every night with an open mind and see what I think. And then you have night one where the President of the United States gets booted out of primetime and finishes his speech well after midnight. Now we've talked all week about the insulting nature of that, the final slap in the face for the president by his party he's been so loyal to for so long. But are they getting old? Have any of you committed to continuing this marathon, if you will? Or has it been just getting a little too late hours? That's my question for you this morning. And again, let me know what you thought overall of DNC Night 3. And any other comments you'd like to make. We got to take a short break. Stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking. We're just getting started, so don't go anywhere. And we are back, broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio here on Market Street in Corning. I'm your host, Frank Acom. As I mentioned, Don Burlew from Watkins Glen International, the president of Watkins Glen International, will be joining us during the Steuben Senior Services Fund portion of our program. Ken, I received your amazing text message, and it's so good, as you've been all week our analyst and commentator. Much better. And everybody who's been commenting on the DNC has been doing much better job than the actual quote-unquote commentators on the mainstream media outlets. But Ken, it's so good, I'm going to save it for just a little bit. So I don't want you to think I'm going to glance over it because I've read it all. It's fantastic. But I think I'm going to save it till closer to the 7 o'clock hour when perhaps, I don't know, have numbers, but perhaps maybe more people are tuned in as they're getting ready for work because it's that good. I hope you don't mind. I hope you don't mind waiting around to hear from Ken, who has been the Frankly Speaking analyst all week with so many other viewers. So keep those comments coming in. They've been fantastic. All right. Next up, Josh Shapiro. Trump slammed Governor Josh Shapiro for backing Harris. And this ties in with what we're going to lead into with the protests. So bear with me. Trump, the Republican presidential candidate, said that Shapiro, who was Jewish, gave a really bad speech for Comrade Kamala. The highly overrated Jewish governor of the great Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, Josh Shapiro, made a really bad and poorly delivered speech talking about freedom and fighting for Comrade Kamala Harris for president. Yet she hates Israel and do nothing to make its journey through the complexities of survival as difficult. Will make its journey through the complexities of survival as difficult as possible, hoping in the end that it will fail. Judge only by her actions, Trump wrote. Yet Shapiro, for strictly political reasons, refused to acknowledge that I'm the best friend that Israel and the Jewish people ever had. I've done more for Israel than any president, and frankly, I have done more for Israel than any person, and it's not even close. Shapiro has done nothing for Israel and never will. Comrade Kamala Harris, the radical left Marxist, who stole the nomination from Crooked Joe, will do even less. Israel is in big trouble. Now, Shapiro, it is interesting. Many speculated, and not just in conservative circles, many speculated that he is not the VP nominee today because of his Jewish faith, because of, as Van Jones said, the marbling of anti-Semitism in the Democrat Party. And I believe when Van Jones said that, that was in reference to Josh Shapiro not getting picked to be VP. I don't know. Let me ask you this question, because I don't want to be biased here. Who gave a better speech, a more vice presidential speech, Shapiro or Walz? What are your initial thoughts about the folksiness of Coach Walz? It seems forced to me. With Biden, it may have gotten old, the come on man and the malarkey, it may have gotten old, but it came from a natural place of saying it for years and years. Tim Walz seems to me to be almost like an act, just like some are criticizing AOC during her speech, going into a weird Southern accent. And the same can be said about Kamala Harris at a recent rally, almost like an act. But to Trump's point, you see the media trying to downplay how impactful he was to Israel, how helpful he was to Israel. Did you see PBS's Judy Woodruff was forced to apologize? Now, keep in mind, she's PBS. Your tax dollars are helping to pay for this. She's PBS's senior correspondent. She falsely told her audience, a live studio audience, and the people watching, I don't know if it's a studio audience, but the people watching, that former President Trump tried to talk Israel out of a ceasefire. She then passed the blame for the blunder by clarifying that she based the flimsy scoop on outside reporting she had read before broadcasting from the DNC. Well, it fit her narrative. So it doesn't matter where it came from if it fits your narrative. We've seen that time and time again. It goes back to Dan Rathers and the National Guard, George W. Bush National Guard story where, well, it turns out the documents we have aren't true, but you know the premise is true. Same thing here. The reporting is that former President Trump is on the phone with the Prime Minister of Israel, urging him to not cut a deal right now because it's believed that would help the Harris campaign, Woodruff told a PBS roundtable. Who knows whether that will come about or not, but I have to think that the Harris campaign would like for President Biden to do what presidents do, which is work on that one. Woodruff caught plenty of flack online for the comment, overwhelmingly from those who pointed out that the rumors she was citing were proven false days before she regurgitated them live on the air. So on Wednesday, she went to NewsHour. Oh, I'm sorry, she's the former NewsHour host. And she went on to clarify the remarks she made about the ongoing ceasefire talks. Quote, as I said, this was not based on my original reporting. I was referring to reports I had read in Axios and Reuters, Axios who just recently cut 10% of their workforce, about former President Trump having spoken with the Israeli Prime Minister. And this goes back to this quote-unquote reporting by Reuters and Axios. And we saw this during the whole Trump administration, that they could just say, oh, we hear, or anonymous sources, and it didn't matter how many times those articles were proven false or proven to be outright lies, they just continue to do it. And then people like Woodruff can come out and quote them, and in this case, it backfired. In the live TV moment, I repeated this story. Keep this in mind how biased the media is towards Trump. In the live TV moment, I repeated the story because I hadn't seen later reporting that both sides denied it. This was a mistake, and I apologize for it. I mean, they don't even hide it. They don't care if it's accurate. They don't care what it does to their credibility. Because at the end of the day, it is, as you are well aware, hey, look at all these waves. It is all about making sure Trump is not in the White House. And this is going to tie in because we saw it from, was it Chuck Schumer yesterday, trying to suggest anti-Semitism is coming from Trump and MAGA supporters and Republicans, when Van Jones has admitted the marbling of the Democrat Party with anti-Semitic bigotry. It's, again, this projection that we've talked about all week and have been talking about for a long time. So we're going to talk about it when we come back. Stay with us. I don't want to run late this morning like I've been running late all week. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on Big Fox. And we are back, broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio. I'm your host, Frank Acom. A comment from a viewer. Good morning, Frank. Good morning. Thank you for watching for me. I'm pretty certain if I continued, I might need to make a reservation at the Betty Ford Clinic. I totally understand. But unlike some other media outlets, I'm going to be completely truthful with you. There is absolutely, because they've been so long and drawn out, no way I could watch them live. So what I've been doing is watching the most relevant ones, or maybe the most important ones, and then while preparing for the show, reading transcripts of the speeches and watching some of the highlight clips. So I am being truthful with you there, because the hour that they are getting over does not make for a fruitful bedtime of the alarm going off at 3:30 in the morning, and also you would not get the quality of the show that you've come to expect. So Thank you. The real trooper in all this is Ken, and we have his rundown, his takeaways. We have his takeaways from each day, every single day. Sorry, I had a comment that I was seeing if making sure something was going right. Okay, yes. So Ken will be coming up here in just a little bit. I have his rundown because they do this on every kind of major event, political event. CNN does the takeaways. So we have our own takeaway, a real correspondent, a real analyst on Frankly Speaking. So thank you, Ken. We'll get to that in just a moment. Anti-Israel protesters clashed with Chicago police yesterday outside of the DNC. It was actually the pro-Hamas supporters continued throughout the night, actually kind of technically entering day 4 of the DNC. 70 people were arrested at the DNC. Now, this ties in, and you might have seen this, Uncommitted. Now, Uncommitted is the group that went in during the primaries and voted uncommitted to Biden. So they would not vote Biden because they did not like what they believed, even though many consider it very weak, his policy towards Israel. And because they don't really want any type of help given to Israel, okay? So they went uncommitted, and it became very large numbers. Hence the comment that I keep mentioning from Van Jones, the anti-Semitic marbling of the Democrat Party. So that's when you started to see Biden, who's never really had a core policy that he wouldn't change for a vote, started weakening even more on Israel. And that's why many have speculated that Kamala Harris did not pick Jewish Governor Josh Shapiro. And that's why she said that she would sit down and listen to the uncommitted leaders. And that's why you've had Biden, even on his speech on Monday, you probably didn't see it in the wee hours of the morning, saying that, and don't quote me here because I'm paraphrasing, saying about the protesters outside that we understand, something like that we get you, we get why you're doing it. So uncommitted leaders, they have started a sit-in, folks, because the Democrats denied their request for a speaking slot at a convention. So keep in mind, I just want you to think about something here. They voted uncommitted to show their protest against the Biden, at that point, Biden-Harris ticket. Do you realize that their uncommitted vote was just as relevant as your vote for Biden? Because neither of them, at the end of the day, counted for anything. So actually, the people that received votes were Biden and uncommitted. And then that one guy that won, what was it, like Puerto Rico? I wonder, did any delegates go to him? Did the delegate count? I know she got enough to be the nominee, but were there any that defected? I haven't read that, and it seems like I would have somewhere. Couple of more waves coming in. We got a busy morning this morning. So the uncommitted leaders, you went in and voted uncommitted. It's almost like every Democrat that voted during the primaries voted uncommitted. Essentially saying, hey, just party elites, get in a smoke-filled room, or as one viewer said, a vape-filled room, and tell us who we need to support. Tell us who you want. Nancy Pelosi, tell us who you want. Obama, Schumer. Who else? All the Democrat elites, because the uncommitted vote from the uncommitted voting bloc just as relevant as the people that voted for Biden, because at the end of the day, neither of their votes counted. So really, aren't all Democrats uncommitted voters? They, again, asking any Democrat out there, please, what do you think about your party elites deciding who you get to vote for? Because again, I've said it a million times on this program, but the only person giving a speech that won votes to be the presidential nominee for the year 2024 was ousted out of prime time, just like he was ousted out of his re-election bid on Monday night, Joe Biden. So yes, the sit-in has begun because they demanded, or requested at least, a speaking slot at the convention. And why wouldn't you give them a speaking slot? Do you not support the uncommitted leaders, the people that are essentially pro-Hamas? Why would you not welcome them with open arms if it's such an important voting bloc, which is what we're learning they are? Why would you not allow them to give their speech? Before addressing reporters, one leader called for a moment of silence. He then described being a child at 15 in southern Lebanon during an Israeli bombing. Our government's policy is to kill people like me, he said. All right, that's policy. Anyway, I don't want to go through what each individual leader said because that's not important, but they are furious at the DNC for also yesterday allowing Israeli hostages to speak and not at the same time having Palestinian voices. Uh-oh. The uncommitted movement, which has threatened to withhold votes from Harris unless she promises to end U.S. support for Israel, is furious at Democrats for allowing Israeli speakers but not Palestinians. The Democratic National Convention heard a moving speech on Wednesday evening from Ron Paulin and Rachel Goldberg, the American-Israeli parents of hostage Hirsch Goldberg Paulin, 23. Like the delegates at the RNC in July, who heard from the parents of American-Israeli hostage Omer Nudra, Democrats welcomed the hostage family and gave them a standing ovation, chanting, "Bring them home." But the uncommitted movement, while supporting the appearance of the hostages' family, was furious that the DNC did not also allow a Palestinian speaker to talk about the ongoing war in Gaza. I'm not going to go through their whole statement. We just don't have time for that. AOC blasts the DNC for not being more sympathetic to the anti-Israel agitators. This is what she tweeted out. Just as we must honor the humanity of hostages, so too must we center the humanity of the 40,000 Palestinians killed under Israeli bombardment. To deny that story is to participate in the dehumanization of Palestinians. The DNC must change course and affirm our shared humanity. Okay. A few other Democrat leaders showed support for the sit-in that's happening outside the DNC arena. Representative Ilhan Omar, this should come as no surprise, hugged the movement's co-founder Abbas Alway and sat down with the uncommitted delegates and others. She made short remarks before she left. Representative Summer Lee of Pennsylvania showed support for the sit-in, saying, "I think it's brave to be out here to continue to fight." She told supporters sitting outside after the convention wrapped, "Don't be discouraged, don't let up. Don't let people move us out of spaces," as they're going into the convention. I think that's funny. Hey, you guys have fun. Sit out here. Do your sit-in. I support you. I'm going to go in there and get some food and drinks. I'll be out a little bit later. And AOC, as I mentioned, spoke to the group virtually, thanking them for taking action. She said the group's request for a speaking slot was, quote, "not in any way an irrational thing to ask for. Just because no has been given as an answer, that doesn't mean that we're accepting no as a final answer." All right. So there you go. That's about the anti-Semitic marbling of the Democratic Party. We'll talk a little bit more about that. I've got to take a break. I see some messages coming in. We are going to hear from Ken, who has heroically watched each night of the DNC, stayed up each night to watch it all with an open mind. And so we are going to hear from his text in just a little bit. But first, because we've got to show you how good his takeaways are compared to CNN. When we come back, we're going to give you CNN's takeaways, and then we'll go to Ken. So stay with us. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox, please stay with us. And we are back. Broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio. Yes, we are working on a roof cam. We will be getting one shortly. And that's why you have that new screen. Well, I guess it got hit by lightning or something. Yeah, fried. This is Frankly Speaking, and we got a message from a viewer. Thank you, Ken. Yes, Ken is doing the heavy lifting for all of us and doing his takeaways so much better. Wow, look at all these waves. Doing such a better job than CNN, because now we're going to read CNN's takeaways and then Ken. Ken coming up after CNN. So the takeaways from the third night of the Democratic Convention, they talk about former President Bill Clinton saying that Harris brings sheer joy. Oh, he added his own twist to it. Sheer joy. Oprah Winfrey urged Americans to choose joy. So I guess joy is going to be, we knew it was going to be used a lot, but that'll probably be like hope for Obama. You'll see it on posters. I'm sure they're already out there. I'm not saying anything groundbreaking. First off, they call Tim Walz the Happy Warrior. Introduces himself. A moment of this magnitude was new for Walz. Prior to his selection as running mate for Harris, not only had he never delivered a high-stakes speech, he never even used a teleprompter. Ah, shucks. Yeah, you're going to get that folksiness, folks. So in a convention filled with former presidents, congressional leaders, celebrities, and more, Walz opted to be something else entirely. He's a two-term governor and a former congressman. But he leaned into earlier portions of his resume: high school teacher, football coach, hunter, and neighbor. Yes, isn't it interesting when you talk about hunting and things like that, when Democrats do this? It's interesting to me that they need to run as conservatives or more conservative to win votes. It seems like people would wake up to that. I'm not going to go through all this. We will talk about Walz a little bit later on, but that was their biggest takeaway, the happy warrior. Then Oprah connects the historic dots. If other Democrats led a generational charge Wednesday night, talk show legend Oprah Winfrey connected the historical dots, portraying Harris as emblematic of the best of America. Okay. Next takeaway. Boy, these are lengthy. For the people versus me, myself, and I, Bill Clinton, who former President Obama once dubbed the explainer-in-chief, framed the election as a choice between Harris being for the people or Trump being about me, myself, and I. I know which one I like better for our country. I like that that's their talking point, but at face value, it's so laughable because Trump has obviously sacrificed so much when it comes to money, business, etc., to run for president. Not to mention what he's had to go through from the media and the Democrats trying to destroy him, not just through lawfare, but just the destruction of it, trying to destroy his family, the reputation of his family, attacking in so many ways. So it's so laughable that that's for him and him alone. Then there's the don't stop thinking about tomorrow. In the Democrat Party, it'll soon be here. How clever. While the main job of the party's convention is to propel Harris into the fall with momentum, this year's gathering in Chicago has also served as a generational handoff. But it's not really a handoff. Again, all of this is to ignore the fact that they really pried this from Biden's hands, and that Biden was the only one to receive a vote to be the nominee for president of the United States by the Democrat Party. So is there an asterisk by that passing of the torch? And finally, and this was a powerful takeaway, the hostage parents share the agony on all sides of the Israeli-Hamas war, but the speeches from the hostages' families. And finally, Capitol Police officer says that Trump betrayed us. So those are the big takeaways from CNN. Now, we do have time. We are going to get to Ken's. If you are just joining us, Ken has been watching faithfully every night of the Democratic National Convention to make sure, with an open mind you, to be sure that to offer his analysis here for Frankly Speaking, and we really appreciate it. Here we go from Ken. Day 3 of us watching the DNC, especially the headliners in the last 2 hours. I think my wife is about to revolt, and the cat is turning into a Democrat. Again, more of the same, Trump bad, Kamala good, and more lies than you can shake a stick at. It amazes me how the Dems use the art of projection. They provably do something that is not beneficial for the country and shamelessly say it is something that the other side did or is doing. And to that point, I know I always interject with what Ken says, but exactly, to Ken's point, remember what Scott Jennings said yesterday, and I still think it's so brilliant. It's something that's stuck with me, and I've talked to a lot of people about it. Out of the last 16 years, 12 years of the White House has been run by Democrats. And yet, the 4 years that Trump had, it destroyed the country. It's the worst thing that ever happened. So the Democrats have had 12 out of the 16 years, and they're telling us what they're going to do day one, how they're going to fix the problems. Well, apparently we now know where the problems came from. And again, it goes back to what Harris is saying with on day one, I'm going to do this. You've been there 3.5 years. And Democrats have been in the White House 12 of the last 16 years. What a great point by Scott Jennings. Going back to what Ken said. Bill Clinton was recanting his and the Democrats' virtues. Hard to believe he could keep a straight face when he knows that everyone else knows about Monica and the Lolita Express. In his heyday, Clinton was one of the best orators in politics. Today, he sounds frail and weak. He shouldn't have noted that he is 78 and younger than Trump because it highlighted that Trump is aging much better than he is. Yes, I've heard from a lot of people and a lot of commentators were saying he did look shaky, his voice kind of raspy, his hand was shaking. But to your point about keeping a straight face when he knows what everyone else knows, that's really been his career. And that's why I was so shocked that they had him speak, because for a time there, during the height of the Me Too movement, he was a social pariah. Even Gillibrand, who used the Clintons' name so often to get elected, stabbed him in the back, turned on him, didn't want to campaign with him because of the Me Too movement. But then that was all forgotten. That's all been erased, remarkably. It's interesting how those movements work within the Democrat Party. It seems that the movement seems to be very important when it benefits them and then ignored when not beneficial. Next up, with what Ken had to say, Pelosi was reliving the Democrats' version of January 6th, but failed to mention that she was responsible for not mobilizing the National Guard. Josh Shapiro seems much more like vice presidential material than Tim Walz, but also knows what he needs to say to stay a good Democrat. I think you're correct that he was also passed over partially due to his Jewish heritage, but mostly due to the fact that he would greatly outshine Kamala in every aspect. I think there is definitely a point there. It's kind of the double whammy there. He's Jewish. They don't want to lose that uncommitted vote. And also, he would outshine Kamala. I think forget the substance of what he had to say. He does give a good speech. He will be running for the White House if he doesn't, have some scandal at some point. He will be running for the White House at some point. And that's why many people speculated that he probably didn't really want it. The same with Gavin Newsom, because the thought is that Kamala Harris, I know what the media is saying now and what they're saying during the convention, but she was arguably the weakest candidate that they could have chosen. So many people thinking that Gavin Newsom and someone like Josh Shapiro not wanting to be on the ticket because if it loses, it does not help their chances in the future. And if Trump wins, they only have 4 years to then be the star themselves. So I would agree with you there. Moving along with Ken's comment, Oprah didn't disappoint. She kept alive the Republicans' bad, Democrats' good talking point, and then the race aspect. Yes, absolutely. She did the Republicans bad, Democrats good. But don't worry, she's an independent. We learn. It's interesting how that works. Just like the Republicans from yesterday that just badmouthed Republicans the whole time. But they'll be stars on MSNBC and CNN. Hey, they might even get their own MSNBC job like Joe Scarborough. He made a career out of that political expediency of badmouthing at one time, his party. So maybe they'll have a future morning show. Next up, Tim Walz kept with a theme of lies and projection, painting himself as a regular guy that wants to keep the world from ending if Trump gets elected. He obviously neglected to talk about policies or try to clear up any of his lies. Yes, about the policy issue, he says American people deserve to know about the Harris-Walz ticket. There's no policy even up on their website, folks. Forget about what the Democrats voted in as their policy that still mentions Biden-Harris and they didn't update it at all. They have nothing on their campaign website about their policies, and goes without saying, no press conferences, nothing that would be off the cuff. And finally, if I make it through night 4, I'm hoping that I will be in the running for the Frankly Speaking Medal of Conservative Values. You will be, Ken, an official correspondent. I don't know if you can say correspondent if you're not on the ground, but I'm going to call you the official Frankly Speaking correspondent for the DNC, whatever that means. I don't know if that's a badge you want to wear with honor. It shows fortitude. Ken, you got to make it through night 4. You got to do it. All right. Thanks again, Ken. We got to take a short break. I am running late. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox, stay with us. And we are back. Running late, as I vowed not to do. Another comment from a viewer. One of my takeaways was how good Stevie Wonder looked at 74. Yes, yesterday was a pop culture. And I know you don't want to hear it. If you watch any other outlet, you've heard it over and over again about the speculation that Beyonce or Taylor Swift or both could be there tonight. And whatever you think of those performers, that would be very huge for Harris and Walz and the Gen Z voter. And you may laugh at that, and you may say, well, we have the polls that show, and it's just, unfortunately, you know it in your gut, that would be something that would be very beneficial for Harris and Walz with the Gen Z vote, who has admitted in polling that they could be persuaded to vote for someone based on an endorsement by a Beyonce or a Taylor Swift. Some people saying that it would make them change who they're going to vote for, other meaning in a negative way, some in a positive way. But anyway, I don't want to talk about that. Democrats spotlighted DACA, illegal aliens, at the DNC yesterday, as the DACA recipients calling for amnesty, saying we need Kamala Harris. John Legend, to the point about Stevie Wonder, John Legend was slammed over his performance. He did Prince's Let's Go Crazy, kind of a tribute. Some calling it an insult. I did not catch that. Who decided that John Legend was a perfect pick to perform Let's Go Crazy? Don't do that again. Sheila E. and that guitarist alone was on fire. Another posted, I don't want to hear John Legend sing Prince songs. Why did they choose John Legend to perform a Prince song? He can't hit the notes and he has no vibe. What an insult to Prince's legacy. Honestly, people, leave it alone already. Have some respect. I guess I'm not really sure about that performance, but I did not catch that performance. Oprah, as we had mentioned, taking a shot at J.D. Vance. We'll talk about that when we come back, because I don't want to run late, and I do have a quick announcement, if you will. And I've already had some people take me up on this, and that is, and I'm very excited about it. You may have seen this on the, let me take a step back. I just have a minute. You may have seen this on my desk. Look what I got yesterday. I don't know if you'll be able to see it. It's a gavel, and on there it says Frank Acom, Advisory Board Chairman, because I am a proud chairman of the Advisory Board of the Salvation Army of Corning, and the Salvation Army of Corning is in need because the kettle campaign was not as successful in years past. This Christmas, as we all ring the bell in the cold and people walk by, some people have wondered, is it because people aren't carrying cash as much? Well, there was some options there. That's neither here nor there. The fact of the matter is the Salvation Army of Corning is in need. I always want to make this point. They are still providing all the services they've always done. It's just becoming more of a struggle. So if you have the opportunity, please purchase a ticket, whether or not you can attend. I hope that you can. But for the upcoming benefit barbecue. Now, this is really cool because we're celebrating 140 years in Corning. Yes, 140 years the Salvation Army has been in Corning. So we are celebrating on September 8th. Amazing food. If you've ever had an event where Corning Catering and Billy Spalding were the caterers, you know it's going to be amazing food. It's going to be barbecue picnic. It's at Nazar Civic Center. It's just $15 per person. It's going to be 1 to 4. There's going to be live music. And can I tell you, I went to the board meeting yesterday. If you are a fan of the silent auction where you purchase a ticket and you put it in the little basket there, trying to win one of the baskets, I have to say, the price of admission is worth it just to try to win some of those baskets. They are really, really impressive. I'm excited about the event. It's going to be a fun day overall. I hope that you can make it, even if you can't. If you want to buy a ticket, maybe donate it. I can. We're going to take some over to the people that can't make it. If they give their ticket back, I'm going to take them over, or someone will, to the fire departments and places like that, so they can get a meal if they're around. So if you want to go that way, but hopefully you can make it out and come see us. There's going to be some special guest speakers, music from Corning Paint and Post High School, just DJ, some really cool stuff throughout the day. I know it's early on. You've got plenty of time, but obviously we've got to sell these tickets so we can give Billy a count. I don't want to go too long with this. I apologize, but this means so much to me. And if you saw the numbers that I do each month about how many people in our community we help, because when it says Corning, it's all of Steuben County. It's unfortunate that name was decided a long time ago, but it is all Steuben County. And when you see the numbers, you're amazed at the amazing work that the Salvation Army of Corning does. So if you want a ticket, you can either go to the Salvation Army on Denison Parkway. You can go over to our great friends at Brown's Cigar Store. What a good excuse. Stop in, have a cigar, get a ticket for the Salvation Army. Or if I happen to be in the window on your way over to Brown's and I'm here, feel free to knock on the door and say, I want a ticket to the Salvation Army, okay? So please, I'd really appreciate it. Now we've got to take a break. Now I am running late because that's how great I am at time management. Stay with us. And we are back. We're Frankly Speaking, broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio. One last thing about the Salvation Army. If you're not down in Corning, but you do want a ticket, text me. We'll figure out a way to get you a ticket. Maybe we can leave it at the door and figure out a way to get the money from you. But otherwise, it's Brown Cigar Store. Knock on the window if I'm here, or over to Salvation Army. Okay, back to Ben Shapiro real quick, because there seems to be this refrain that it's the hope and change messaging that we're getting, meaning the Obama kind of messaging that we're getting at the DNC. So Brett Baer asked Josh Shapiro, I mean, we've had 3.5 years of a Biden-Harris administration. So that message of change and a new thing, is that just overlooking the Biden-Harris 3.5 years? Shapiro said, we have made progress. We've got a ways to go. We've got more work to do. And as Kamala Harris continues her campaign, she will continue to lay out that vision for not just hope, but meaningful change for people. So Brett Baer said, but is it a delicate dance to say this is hope, this is change, even though you have a Democrat president who kind of was pushed out over the past weeks? Yes, and if you look at it, as Scott Jennings said, Democrats have been in control of the White House for 12 of the last 16 years. So what's this change they're referring to? But Shapiro wrapped up by saying, I would respectfully disagree with you. I mean, this respectfully, of course. I think what Joe Biden did was really patriotic. He understood that in every chapter of our American story, Americans have written those chapters, then passed the marker to the next generation to continue that work. He did that work here in passing the torch to Harris, passing the marker, if you will, to Kamala Harris to write that next chapter. So I would respectfully disagree. I think what he did was really patriotic. Did anybody suggest? What? Boy, and I see that Bill Clinton compared Biden to George Washington. But let's talk about Oprah. Oprah took a shot at J.D. Vance with a childish cat lady remark. She gave a shout out to childless cat ladies. Okay. We are not so different from our neighbors, Winfrey said. When a house is on fire, we don't ask about the homeowner's race or religion. We don't wonder who the partner is or how they voted. I'm not sure if she's right. What I mean by that is, I don't think there's a lot of helping hands for people if you had, let's say, a MAGA sign in your yard. I don't know. There seems to be a very big anger and hatred coming from the Democrat Party towards quote-unquote MAGA supporters. So I'm not sure if she's accurate. And if the place happens to belong to a childless cat lady, well, we try and get that cat out too, she quipped. I don't know. Was it forceful? I know the pop culture stuff works for the Democrats. Now, when I say works, their supporters like it. I'm not sure it was beneficial in the long term for Hillary Clinton. As a matter of fact, I think it was kind of detrimental for Hillary Clinton. So we'll talk more about that. And we're going to talk about Bill Clinton coming up in just a moment. Keep those comments coming in. Hour number one, hard to believe, hour number one is in the books. We got hour number two coming up. We're going to hear from Don Burlew, the president of Watkins Glen International. And we're going to hear from you and your comments. Keep those waves coming in as well. We got a good number coming for just hour number one. Stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. And we are back, broadcasting live with hour number two of Frankly Speaking. I'm your host, Frank Acom, and of course, this is the Hesselson studio, which we broadcast proudly from each morning. A comment from a viewer, and I just want to preface this. I did not steal your idea here. I did not see your comment coming in when I was talking about Oprah's comments, but an astute point. Oprah's comments about a house on fire. She says that Democrats would rush in to help. More likely, they would spin it into a pollution tax. It would be more likely a defunded policeman risking his life to save someone in the building. Thank you very much. Now, this is how they were trying to hype up Bill Clinton, who was, again, a political and social pariah during the Me Too movement. Now everything's okay. We're to forget that. Bill Clinton, yeah, because remember, he wasn't even like campaigning and fundraising with these people because they said what was wrong with Monica because of her age and his position of power, and of course, Jeffrey Epstein, et cetera, et cetera. But now that's all forgotten. Forgive and forget, I guess. Bill Clinton ripped up his draft of his convention speech after watching opening night. Now, this is to assume that Bill Clinton and others are sitting there at their desk and writing the speech for themselves. How many of these are, and I'm not saying that maybe not the outline is there, but so many speechwriters are involved, folks. But former President Bill Clinton ripped up the draft of his speech he had been working on after the first night of the DNC this week, after seeing and feeling the energy and enthusiasm inside the United Center Monday night, Clinton decided he needed to start anew and begin writing with a more fun, youthful, joyful approach. He's going to have fun. I can't stress this enough, added the aide who had read the former president's new speech, who probably wrote the speech. I mean, this is not an article you would see about Republicans, correct? That's from CNN. That caught my attention this morning, just again to show you the bias. In the end of the day, it doesn't really amount to a heck of a lot, but he ripped it up because there was so much joy. Oh my gosh, there was so much enthusiasm that his old speech wasn't going to work because this is like something he's never seen before. Bill Clinton lauded Joe Biden as a modern-day George Washington and a president who, quote, healed our sick. I do want to say one word about President Biden. Remember, he had an improbable turn that made him president. And we were in the middle of a pandemic and an economic crash. He healed our sick and put the rest of us back to work. And he strengthened our alliances for peace and security, stood up for Ukraine, trying desperately to get a ceasefire in the Middle East. He strengthened our alliances for peace and security? Wow, to Ken's point, I understand what you're saying now. Just repeat the lie and hope it sticks. Wow. And let me continue, though. And then he did something it's really hard for a politician to do. He voluntarily gave up political power. And George Washington knew that, and he did it. And he set the standard for us, serving 2 terms before it was mandatory. It helped his legacy, and it will enhance Joe Biden's legacy. To that point, and you know my theory on this, when we talk about Joe Biden's legacy, if you really want to cement Joe Biden's legacy, and I don't think that Joe Biden hasn't thought of this. And I know I'm going a little off on a limb when I suggest that he wants Trump to win. But if Trump were to win, do you imagine that joy that Biden egotistically would feel? Because he could go to the Nancy Pelosi's and the Obamas who stabbed him in the back and say, I told you I was the only one with the record to beat Trump. I had beaten Trump, and I told you I was the only one that could do it, and you pushed me out. And you ousted me or cooed me or however you want to say it. And you were wrong. I was right. Boy, you want to talk about legacy then. And don't think for a moment that Biden and specifically Biden's family doesn't realize that. Now, I'm not saying they're going in the voting booth and voting Trump. I'm just saying it's kind of a win-win here for Biden. If Harris wins, Democrats in office, he's happy. If Trump wins, he who notoriously has a big ego, he'd get a little bit of joy out of it. Don't think that's not the case. Okay, Bill Clinton dubs Kamala Harris the president of joy. Now, did he really dub her that? I mean, it doesn't dub kind of insinuate like he's the first one to talk about this? He's not. Joy is being overused just like weird is being overused. Again, they love pushing this narrative. Having ripped up the draft of his convention speech after watching opening night to write a new one, quote, with a more fun, youthful, joyful approach. What is it? The man who shot Liberty Valance. I think it's that. Don't quote me. I sometimes get this mixed up. I think it's the man who shot Liberty Valance. In that movie, this is what it reminds me of with the ripping up the draft of his convention speech. A politician rides in and he says something to the extent of, he goes, there's so much energy and excitement in this room. He throws down his speech. I can't do it from the paper. I have to do it from the heart. And he gets up there and gives his speech. And remember, he's a politician. And the camera zooms down, and the supposed written speech that he had prepared and worked so hard on was blank paper. It was just a political move. That's what this sounds like. I believe, correct me if I'm wrong if it's not the man who shot Liberty Valance, but I believe it is. The idea that I was going to read it from here, but I have to do it from here, and throws down the piece of paper and it's blank. Having ripped up the draft of his convention speech after watching opening night to write a new one with, quote, a more fun, youthful, joyful approach, Clinton encouraged those listening to let in a breath of fresh air by voting for Harris, saying, you'll be proud of it for the rest of your life. Kamala Harris is the only candidate in this race who has the vision, the experience, the temperament, the will, and yes, the sheer joy to get something done. I mean, look, what does her opponent do with his voice? He mostly talks about himself. So the next time you hear him, don't count the lies, count the eyes. Oh, that's his big talking point, or his big takeaway. So back to this, the temperament. She has the temperament, the joy. What we hear of reports of working for her, what was the rate? 91% of people that had worked for her had left throughout her time as vice president. What reports we've heard, it does not sound like sheer joy or a temperament that you wanted to at least be employed for. Just something that the media is not going to cover, something, though, I think you should keep in mind. Bill Clinton says he may be unable to speak at future DNCs as hands tremble on stage. He has aged. I mean, there's no doubt about it. I want to say this from the bottom of my heart. I have no idea how many more of these I'll be able to come to. I started in 76, and I've been to every one since, 72. Boy, I'm getting old. Let's cut to the chase. I'm too old to gild the lily. 2 days ago, I turned 78, the oldest man in my family for 4 generations. And the only personal vanity I want to assert is I'm still younger than Donald Trump. Clinton looks way beyond his years. He is speaking slowly, raspy, shaky voice. He has aged in every way, said one commentator. What were your thoughts? Clinton has shaky hands as he speaks. He should join Joe and go to the nursing home, another one added. Bill Clinton has lost his fastball and is sucking the energy out of the United Center. Wow. What were your thoughts, having seen Bill Clinton's speeches of the past? What were your thoughts? Well, I know we haven't even talked about Tim Walz. We're going to talk about Tim Walz next, okay? Keep those comments coming in. We're moving fast because I've got Don Burlew, the president of Watkins Glen International, coming up in just a little bit. On tomorrow's program, tune in right from the jump, right from 6 o'clock, because we have 2 guests. So we are going to have plenty of time to talk about Harris's speech, even though we know what the media is going to say already about it. The momentum is going to increase. It's going to be historic, etc. But we do have 2 guests, so we're going to make sure we talk about as much as we possibly can during the segments that we have. First up is Sweeney Todd, the Demon Barber of Fleet Street. That's Elmira Little Theater. That actually opens tomorrow, so they asked if I could have them on the program to promote it, and I said, of course, because this show, first and foremost, is about community. And that's a fun community event. And then after that, in the 7 o'clock hour, our good friend, Assemblyman Phil Palmisano, who, of course, we'll ask him about the DNC. But it's been so long since we caught up, and we planned this quite a lot in advance. So I'm excited, as always, that Phil, he is one of the fan favorites that I always talk about. As we affectionately call it, one viewer called it Phil Fridays. Because at some points of the year, we have him on every Friday, it seems like. So, yes, if you have any questions, feel free to get them to me ahead of time. It may make it easier. But one thing I want to highlight, tomorrow, continue to weigh in about what you saw at the DNC, because I'll either read them when we come back from break when I'm talking to Phil, or we'll save them all to the end and do the last segment, say goodbye to Phil, do the last segment, and read every single comment about the DNC. But most likely I'll probably sprinkle them in during our interview with Phil. So don't hesitate for a moment to let me know what you thought of the final night of the DNC tonight and the job that Harris did. Again, it's going to be historic. It's going to be one of the greatest speeches ever given. The momentum, the awe-inspiring speech that propelled Harris to the next level, that the reins are off from the Biden White House and those people that eventually quit that were working for her behind the scenes because they didn't like working for her. They were actually keeping her down. She had this in her the whole time. And they didn't believe in her, and what a misplaced disbelief that was, because she had it this whole time. Those are the kind of articles we'll see. And if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But I'm not going to be wrong. And they are going to be glowing reviews. You are not going to get too many reviews late tonight or tomorrow morning that suggests that it was a bad speech. Because remember, too, she's on a teleprompter. It's when she struggles the most is when it's off the cuff, when it's ad-libbed. And that's when you get the word salads and the awkwardness and the laughs and the uncomfortableness. And we saw that back in 2019 when she was running for president. We also saw it the few times that she did speak to the press as vice president and sit down for interviews, which, again, it is August the 22nd. So we have, a little over a week for her to fulfill that promise of one interview in a month, one sit-down interview in a month for the nominee for President of the United States by the Democrat Party who never received a single vote for that position. So there could be some questions. Again, has not put up policy on her own website and where she stands. So it seems like there could be quite a few questions, and maybe more than one interview in a month would be helpful for the American voters. If it is about the American voters, if it is about helping the American people and not just about making sure you run down the clock and make it through November with the media's praise and win the election. So is it about helping the American people, letting them know where you stand, or is it about running down the clock and just getting that win, getting that W? But we got to take a short break. Keep those comments coming in. I see a few that hopefully we'll be able to get to, but I got to take a break. Stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. And we are back. There we go. With Frankly Speaking. Broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio. Thank you so much for joining us. I was just looking at all these great comments coming in. Let's get to it. You're right, Frank. Thank you. But why? The scene. Oh, okay. Yeah. So it was the man who shot Liberty Valance. I was almost positive. But because Jimmy Stewart was there and it had politics involved, I was almost, I said no, because it's a cowboy. It couldn't be Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. So I was almost positive. That's a great movie, by the way. Man Who Shot Liberty Valance, if you've never seen it. The scene is Major Cassius Starbuckle, played by John Carradine, who nominates Buck Langhorne, Tom Hennessy, who's uncredited in the movie, at the Territorial Convention session. Yes, isn't that such a great, that's such a beautiful, it's always been a scene that stuck with me because it's such a beautiful political move. And if you're just joining us, what he does, just like we keep hearing that Bill Clinton tore up the original draft of his speech because the first night of the DNC was so full of joy and excitement and energy, he had to put a more youthful and an exciting spin on his speech. Okay. Well, in that scene in The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance, politician rides in, and I'm paraphrasing, I wrote this, I prepared this for this tremendous event, but with all this excitement, I can't read from a script. I've got to do it from the heart. And he throws down the script, and the camera shows it, and the guy picks it up, and it's just a blank piece of paper. It's all part of the show, right? All right, another comment. Bill Clinton is still a good speaker. His administration was old school Democrat, more middle of the road than Kamala's far left, hair on fire, joy speak angle. Very, very good point. I would say Bill Clinton, it helped when the Republicans won the majority for him to become more middle of the road. I will say that. But yes, I do believe there is still a difference, shockingly, from the Clinton years to what we're seeing today with the strain of anti-Semitism, with the extremists. Anyway, yes, thank you. I just feel Democrat voters' hearts have been so polluted with mainstream news negativity. Their joy is more akin to a shark enjoying his kill. It cannot be understated how, and maybe that's why perhaps you could argue, bring it up too often on this program. The media bias sways so many people. Remember, these same people that are now jumping for joy, that have never been happier in their lives, are the same people that did not like Harris, did not want her to get it. But all it takes is the elites telling them, listen, your vote doesn't matter. Your vote doesn't count. It's now Harris. Okay. And now we support Harris, and we support her wholeheartedly. Also, and you can't underestimate this part of it, no matter how many people tell you that they're really into politics, or I'm a staunch Democrat because I believe in their policies and I do my research, there are many people, and the media has admitted it, there are many people that are voting for Harris or are supporting Harris that know nothing about her time as vice president, who may not have been able to tell you she was vice president. They know nothing, definitely nothing, about her presidential run in 2019 for 2020. Remember, she did not make it to 2020. She was out in December. Again, never having received a vote for president to be the presidential nominee for the Democrat Party. So there are a lot of people going into this with, you know how we mentioned, well, if it's a candidate we don't even know, they come in as a fresh slate, and that works out very good for Democrats. We talked about this before Biden dropped out, like a Gavin Newsom, something like that. It's the same situation. I would argue that some people probably knew more about Gavin Newsom because they kept calling him a rising star than Kamala Harris. Didn't follow her work as vice president because she was very quiet as vice president, and definitely didn't follow her campaign, and especially the younger people, but even just in general. So they would not admit that now, but I bet you that's a large part of this voting block of those supporting Harris that just are politically astute like you are, the viewer, that has been following what's been happening. They're more of the people that, they know they're going to vote Democrat, so why bother watching? Another comment. I just can't feel joy when I watch, no matter how hard I try. All I can think of is the current president's angry speech multiplied over and over throughout the arena. Good point. I've got a wave coming in. To that point, I know I keep pushing off talking about Tim Walz, and we got to go. We've got Don Burlew. But there's a piece, and this is coming from, I'm not going to say an anti-Trump sentiment, but kind of a little bit. Led by Obama, Democrats' schoolyard taunts mirror Trump's trash-talking tactics. In an unexpected twist, last month, RNC, led by noted trash talker Donald Trump, was filled with family-safe content, while the Democrats' affair this week has been replete with nasty abuse. American parents who sat down with their kids Tuesday to watch the Democratic National Convention were faced with several uncomfortable moments, reminiscent of the schoolyard. If you expected better of a former president, think again. Barack Obama's keynote speech called out Trump's childish nicknames and crazy conspiracy theories, and then used a vulgar hand gesture. You know all about that. I'm not going to talk about it. Anyway, I just thought that was a very good point. So anyway, there you go. All right, let's see a comment. Here we go. Hey, Frank, stop drinking the Kool-Aid. Where am I getting the Kool-Aid from? I know the saying. I'm not denying. Did you know, as a side note, that it wasn't actually Kool-Aid used at Jonestown? I'm not criticizing what you're saying. I always found that a fascinating fact. I interviewed a survivor of Jonestown back when I was in radio, and it was actually Flavor Aid. Interesting. Who am I drinking the Kool-Aid from? Out of curiosity, where am I being, for lack of a better term, brainwashed? But thank you for the comment. I don't know how to respond. All right. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking. Don Burlew from Watkins Glen International will be our guest when we come back. This is Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Acom. We are broadcasting from the Hesselson studio, and this is a Steuben Senior Services Fund section of our program. First of all, it seems like I just interviewed you like a few weeks ago. Where did the summer go?
I don't know, but we've had a great summer.
You've had a great summer specifically. How are things been going all summer long at Watkins?
We've had a super summer, Our stands have been filled. Our events have been great. We started out with our IMSA event, and we've just been going right from then.
Yeah.
Our track rentals have been great. So there's cars on track every day, and that's pretty cool to hear.
Yeah, it's pretty. Do you ever get sick of the constant motor noises?
No, actually, if it gets to be 8:30, you're like, why don't I hear cars?
Oh, that's interesting. So yes, the summer is going fast, and you've got a really special event coming up this weekend before we start talking about going bowling at the Glen.
We do. We have our SBRA event, which is, our sports car. It's our vintage weekend. And we also have a Trans Am series that is coming in, our GT International that is also going to be there. So that's a great weekend as well. Yeah. Looks like Mother Nature is going to be good to us, so the weather's going to be great. So we're excited about that. They're actually moving in today. So.
Oh, okay. What should people know if they want to go to the Vintage Grand Prix?
They're qualifying on Thursday, Friday. Then they race Saturday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday as well.
Okay.
So they can get tickets at theglen.com. We can also do camping still. But if you want to come for one day or all 3 days, please reach out and come.
And I know this is big each year. How's the concert series been going?
Oh my God, our concert series has been wonderful. We added some new folks this year. Last week we had Top Shelf from Elmira, which had a great turnout, and our next one will be September 5th, and which is kind of starts out our week before Cup. So we're going to have a whole week of events. And speaking of that, go bowling at the Glen. How's the planning going? I mean, at this point, if it's not almost done planning, you're out of luck, right? Yeah, I always tell people we're constantly planning. We never stop planning for the event that's happening today, tomorrow. Sure. It's just always, because you're always tweaking, and there's something that will come up that you have to kind of do a shift change or be nimble to accommodate something that's come up. But it's constant planning, and that's what the team does very well to accommodate the event. So we're super psyched for our Cup weekend. They'll start loading in, it's September 11th through the 15th, so we're pretty excited about that. And then we have events. We have 3 concerts on Thursday, Friday, Saturday night. Yeah.
Just add more stuff to it.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
We have a glow stick walk on Thursday night, which we've never done.
Neat.
We have glow sticks, and that'll be kind of interesting to do. We're also doing a laps on the track, so you can drive your, pace car laps. And also, let me see, what else we got going? Expanded fan zone. We've got hot saw racing coming on Sunday morning.
Yeah.
So we are packed in. There's not, a free minute.
No. And the laps are really popular because you do that throughout the summer, it seems like.
We do. So we have Drive the Glen every day at noon and 5 o'clock. And the only time we don't have it is just because if one of our track rentals is extended in the day. And I'll tell you, they're usually sold out.
Yeah.
People love to drive the track and really get a feel and of the iconic track and to say, it's on my bucket list.
Yeah.
We hear that every day.
And we're talking Go Bowling at the Glen. Now, is this technically like your NASCAR debut?
It is.
Does that make you more nervous, excited? Where are you at as we near?
I'm super pumped for it.
Yeah.
I went down to the 500 and the Rolex, so you got a chance to really see some, large-scale events at a premier facility like Daytona. So you come home and say, okay, what can we do?
Yeah.
And the team has put together just a spectacular event.
What do you think that week's going to look like for you, though? Long days.
Super long days, but, also the adrenaline will just be there because once they start rolling in, I think that's what the most exciting is.
Yeah.
You see those haulers come in.
How nice is it to be working with Go Bowling? Because they've been a part of this for quite a while now.
They have, and they're a super organization. We're going to have our lanes up and have some mini competitions this year. Trust me, I am not one of the bowlers,
okay.
nor do you want me to be a bowler. But Go Bowling is super excited about that, and that'll be a fun afternoon to do that as well.
Now that this is a part of the playoffs, how does that affect your planning and your preparation? I know it's a different time frame than it's been in the past. Does it change things up? So you're new to it, and it's kind of a new avenue that you're going down.
Yeah, so, we started planning, and people were pretty excited about us being in the playoffs last year. Of course, everybody had some, little oh my's about the date change being in September. But for us locally, what I've said is what we really did is we allowed the hotels and the restaurants to be packed full in August, and they kind of sift down a little once Labor Day hits, and now we've just added a whole nother 3 weeks on because of our event. They're packed again in September, getting ready for the fall season. So we're pretty excited that we're being able to do that. I think our fans are excited to as well. It just gives a whole different twist on how people camp.
And I think it's interesting, too, that being in September 11th through the 15th, it's got to be nice for the people that have been camping for maybe decades to not be in the blistering sun. You hope anyway, right? In the way that it's just a different time of year, and such a beautiful time of year around here.
It is, and I look on social media all the time, and people are counting down the days till they're going to show up. We have a staging place where folks show up actually early before they can even really get into the track to set up camp.
The camp before camping, right?
It is. It's a camp before camp. So that's kind of cool that they're that excited about being on property and just being a part of the whole setup.
Yes. And I think it's really neat because you do have other things going on beside the races. Like you mentioned, the Real American Hardwood Open Hot Saw United States Championship. So you're adding things throughout the day, so it's not just watching races. It's just an all-around fun event every day.
Right, and we've expanded our kids zone this year. We're also having what they call the Fueling History trailer come from Daytona, which it debuted in Daytona at the 500, and it's been traveling to tracks, and so it will be traveling to our tracks. And what it is, our track is what it is it gives you the history and kind of moves you through motorsports racing and management and where we are today. And it's a really cool exhibit that comes in a hauler.
Yeah.
So that's something that we've never had here before. That'll be added, so we're pretty excited about that.
I would think so. And I know, looking at the website, and I think this is so great because so many people want to go to the Go Bowling at the Glen on September 11th through the 15th, and you offer, and I think this is so nice, offer discounts to military, first responders, teachers, students. What a great idea to get people involved that maybe, they've done so much for us that want to come and maybe save a little bit and have a good time.
Yeah, and that was one of the things my team said is how can we get back to the community and what can we do? With the date change, what can we do? We also come out with another campaign. I think it'll be today or tomorrow for NYSEG.
Oh, okay.
NYSEG workers keep us all moving.
Yeah.
As I always say, keep us rocking and rolling. Without them, life would be pretty difficult on everybody. So that kind of came to light last week with, things that happened in our local community with the storm. So we said, let's thank NYSEG workers. So idea. That one will be coming out shortly. We're also doing another campaign for camping that'll have a little added special with it. So there again, it's just trying to get people near and far to say the track is attainable and I can come and enjoy motorsports at all different levels. And let me tell you, the Cup weekend will have something for everybody.
And when you talk about camping, there's different sorts of camping that people should be aware of, right? I mean, there's a family camping. There's kind of the more fun. Is that stuff you can find out about on the website?
It is. So we have, and if you call when you, if you don't want to just do it through the Glen.com, you can call the number that's on our website and talk through with a representative. Say, this is what I'm looking for, and then they'll help you figure out what fits what goes with you, your family. The four of you that are going, just have a good, hardcore weekend.
Yes,
it's
NASCAR weekend.
Right. It's all different types of camping, so our team helps people figure that out.
And you had mentioned this earlier, and this word's come up a couple times in our interview, but community. Watkins Glen International is such an important part to this community, and you have people coming from far and wide, but also it's such a hometown event as well. It's really kind of unique in that way.
It is. So, we talked about this usually, actually, the SVRA weekend butts up with the Grand Prix weekend in Watkins Glen. And just by chance, because our schedule changed this weekend, it doesn't. But I will tell you, the Village of Watkins Glen is still supports, and we're still going to, reaching out and saying we've done a lot of things to be ready for the event this weekend, as well as to support our Go Bowling at the Glen, because we do put a lot of people in town and fill a lot of hotels do a lot of shopping at the grocery stores and things like that normally people wouldn't have to wait in line. And for probably 5 or 6 days, there's a lot of visitors in our community.
It's fun to see on Market Street. You know when it's that week or even leading up to that week, because you know how it is when you're here. You just get to recognize people. You go, I've never seen that person before. So it's kind of neat for our community. It's great for our community. Now, what should people know just before we go in preparation for the races? Maybe if they've never been before or if they're thinking about going.
So if you're planning this weekend, you can still come to Gate 2 and get tickets.
Oh, okay.
Which is our main gate. And for NASCAR, our Cup weekend, you can go to theglen.com and it has all our information. There's also our 188 number on there. And if you have questions, and a representative will talk you through what your needs are. What are you looking for? They'll ask you the questions, and then they'll help you find the best package that'll meet your needs, because we have a ton of campaigns and packages out there to thank our supporters and our community members.
All right, before we go, September 16th, when it's all over, what's your day going to look like? Did you take a vacation day? Sleep in?
Actually, my team is all there, making sure that everybody that needs to get back on the road is on the road for the next event. Yeah. And the folks that are kind of just taking a deep breath are just kind of saying, wow, we got through it. Yeah. We made it. It was successful. And where do we go from here? Because that's our last big event. We still have track rentals until the first week in November, so we'll be busy till then. But we'll be taking a deep breath.
Yeah. Well, best of luck with everything, and I hope you get some time to enjoy it, not just working the whole time.
Oh, I'll enjoy just being at the track.
Yeah. Well,
it just makes me smile every day.
Oh, that's great. Well, thanks so much for being on the show.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
We'll be right back. Frankly Speaking, stay with us. And we are back, broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio. I'm your host, Frank Acom. Thanks again to Don Burlew for being a part of the Steuben Senior Services Fund section of our program. Sounds like a fun weekend. This weekend, of course, Go Bowling at the Glen is always a blast. So thank you for being on the show. A couple comments while we were at that interview. Good morning, Frank. I haven't watched any of the DNC at all because this is a coronation of Harris. It is a joke and for entertainment purposes only. No intelligent position-based issues. And I am sorry, but it is a celebration of self-indulging politicians. A very good point. And speaking of self-indulging, this next comment from a different viewer makes sense. Wow, very cool that you interviewed a Jonestown survivor. Someday you need to put together a list or be interviewed about your interviews. I regret I never knew much about your radio show, so grateful for Frankly Speaking. Thank you so much. Yes, speaking of self-indulgent, I do have a list, somewhat updated list, but the person I interviewed was Charles Kraus. And if you're just joining us, this is in reference to someone asking me to stop drinking the Kool-Aid. And I had mentioned that what I learned in this interview was that even though that's a very common term, don't drink the Kool-Aid, it wasn't actually Kool-Aid that was used at the Jonestown Massacre. It was actually Flavor Aid, which I thought was very interesting. And that came from Charles Krause. He was a survivor of the Jonestown Massacre, and he was a former Washington Post foreign correspondent and the author of Guyana Tragedy, the story of Jim Jones. So yes, that's what that's in reference to. Another comment from a viewer. You made me think, Frank, the man who shot Liberty Valance has a lot of resonance with today. By the way, if you're just tuning in, you probably have a lot of questions. We were talking about the man who shot Liberty Valance earlier. You recall the final scene where the newspaper editor refuses to print the true story of Tom as the man who shot Valance, not Stoddard. To paraphrase his famous line, this is the DNC, sir. And when the lie becomes fact, print the lies. Thank you very much. That's a good point. Great movie. And making me think it's been a while since I watched it. I think I'll go back. Tim Walz. Isn't it interesting? This happened the other day, too, where Bernie Sanders gives a speech railing against the rich. And then Pritzker gets up and says, I'm really rich. I'm a billionaire. Well, Tim Walz bashes J.D. Vance for going to Yale. He said, I grew up in Butte, Nebraska, a town of 400 people. I had 24 kids in my high school class, and none of them went to Yale. Kind of taking a dig there at J.D. Vance, which I'm not really sure why you would be taking a dig at something they support, kind of the Ivy Leagues. But so many people on the stage that night came from Yale and Ivy League graduates in general. Jamie Harrison, the chairman, Virginia McGregor, treasurer of the DNC, Alex McGill, all these people went to Yale and Princeton. There was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 from last night. Anyway, just interesting. Walz delivered what is the shortest VP acceptance speech in 40 years. It lasted 15 minutes and 27 seconds and is the shortest on record dating back to the Cold War. It is the shortest acceptance speech by a vice presidential candidate since C-SPAN began tracking the data in 1984, when the network started fully recording data from the DNC and RNC. Just interesting. Now, his son, emotional, broke down in tears to share in that emotional moment with his father, yelling, "That's my dad." "Hope, Gus, and Gwen, you are my entire world," he said, as Gus shed tears and pointed at his dad. That's my dad. Very moving part of the speech and part of the convention. Tim Walz, I know I'm moving fast now. Tim Walz says he and Kamala Harris owe it to the American people to detail the policies, despite, again, not publishing any policy on their campaign website. He said that they owe it to the American people to detail the policies they would enact. I think we owe it to the American people to tell them exactly what she'd do as president before we ask them for their votes. And yet, there's a lack of a policy page on their campaign website. And of course, we've talked about it numerous times, the lack of press conferences, the lack of sit-down interviews. One of the things that I thought was interesting, and I'm not reading too much into it, but when they talked about unifying the country and they talked about calming down the rhetoric after the attempted assassination of former President Trump. Do you remember that? The media doesn't talk about it, but they said they would tamp down the rhetoric, and yet he used words like fight. If we fight, we will win. Just some interesting things. Walz described himself as a gun owner, an expert marksman, saying he had the trophies to prove it, and said he has learned how to compromise without compromising my values, meaning that he would push for some type of gun control. We saw this from our Senator Gillibrand, too, when she was in a more conservative congressional district. She was very pro-gun, and now we know where she is now. We have a similar here with Walz in a conservative congressional district, very pro-gun, not as much so now. We have so many things to get to. So what were your thoughts about Tim Walz accepting the nomination to be vice president on the vice presidential slot in the Harris-Walz ticket? Representative James Comer, and you know the name James Comer, a Republican from Kentucky, says if an American goes to China, meaning Tim Walz, 30 times in the 90s, they have surveillance footage of him. They have surveillance footage, probably of his honeymoon night. What kind of compromise is that? They were worried about Trump in a situation, I'm not going to mention it specifically, but that was all made up. This is serious business. It's very serious. China thinks long term. It's very possible that China would be grooming an up-and-coming rising star in the political process to try to have a foothold in our government. I mean, they've done this in the military. We've caught them with spy rings in our universities. This is how China operates. They think long term. And again, I can't say this enough. When you look at Hunter Biden's ties with Communist China, it was for money. It looks like Walz's ties may be for ideology. And this is something that we should be concerned about. And we're trying to gather as much information as we can, as quick as we can, to present to the American people. So now is the time for Harris to convince voters tonight that she can be the 47th president, said Stephen Collinson. Kamala Harris has helped America see joy, the unbiased CNN says, and now she needs to make America see a president. Well, it will be a very presidential speech tonight. No matter what you see with your eyes, just like the economy, just like public safety, it will be a presidential speech, very presidential. It'll be historic. It'll be groundbreaking. It will be perhaps the best speech ever given. Van Jones, before we go to break, says there is a muscular patriotism associated with Kamala Harris. It's like there's a distinction between what I would call a cheaper patriotism and a deeper patriotism. This is a deeper patriotism. It's not the raw stuff. They are asserting the value of freedom. It's not just the freedom to not pay your taxes or the freedom to say, get off your lawn. It's the freedom to live a full life. And to be able to live a full life, we need each other and our government. I haven't seen so many USA signs. There is a muscular patriotism associated with Harris. She wants to fight. She said, I believe in this country and believe in the particular vision of freedom, and we are going to fight for it. What is that vision? We don't have policy. I'm so confused by this. I feel like this idea of the future being so much more important than the past. Like there's a nostalgia here for a kinder country, but there's also a determination to go. A comment from a viewer. The ties to Beijing, if true, should frighten everyone. Well, there are definitely ties there. I mean, he does not hide the fact that he visited China and loved China very much. We got to take a break, though, because I'm running late. Stay with us. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox, stay with us. And we are back, broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio here on Market Street in Corning. So many last-minute waves coming in. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. CNN commentator, this is the, and I say this in the back, but they continue to mention is making the rounds of, and really of how important it is, what Scott Jennings said, and I wanted to reiterate it because we mentioned it yesterday, that Democrats have controlled the White House for 12 of the last 16 years. For all the talk about division and problems in the country and that people are hurting, Democrats have mostly controlled the country. And somehow it's still all former President Donald Trump's fault. And somehow she hasn't been at the center of it. So to me, that's still the glaring hole of this campaign that hasn't yet been solved at this convention. How do you explain all the problems that will be solved by the person who is currently in there for the past 3.5 years? That is supposed to already be working on solving them. Now, Democrats are upbeat at the convention, and that's thanks to, according to the Wall Street Journal, Nancy Pelosi, because the former House Speaker wins the credit for the party's renewed optimism after helping pressure Biden to step aside. So now it's heroic what she did, ousting what is considered the George Washington of our generation. Interesting. Pelosi said in an interview, the convention is, of course, a different one than was envisioned 1 month ago, and it's one that is going to be enthusiastically attended. But the credit, she insisted, goes to the president. He made the decision about how we should proceed, and I respect him for the decision. His selflessness is something that the American people admire greatly, and the reaction that people have had to it, I hope, is satisfying to him in return. But they haven't been talking. She also claimed she wanted originally, which I don't know why she kind of almost keeps digging a hole. She wanted an open process. But the Harris smartly took advantage of the opportunity. So she didn't even want, she's essentially saying she didn't necessarily want Harris. Many of us were concerned about the election and wanted to have an open process. It was an open process. Anyone could have gotten it. Harris had the endorsement of the president, and she politically astutely took advantage of it and shut down, not just shut down, but won the nomination. But anybody else could have gotten it. There was no open process. Biden essentially forced their hands that it would have to be Harris. They're trying to report, and I do not believe this, and what are your thoughts, that Donald Trump is most hurt by Kathy Hochul, Governor Hochul's speech at the DNC. It's because of a tweet that he posted, not a tweet, a truth or whatever they call it. Kathy Hochul, the very unpopular governor of New York, was the nastiest speaker on Monday evening at the Democratic National Convention as it pertains to your favorite president, me. Her total hatred and statements made about me had no bounds. I was amazed for two reasons. Number one, I did a great job in New York, employed thousands of people, built some of the most beautiful and successful buildings, and paid billions of dollars in taxes. Number two is that, on the very distinct possibility I will win the presidency, wouldn't it be better for the people of New York State to have a governor who got along with the president? Adversarial relationships are not good in politics. Unfairly, I am before a very biased and hateful New York judicial system that is appointed and largely controlled by the governor. With the vitriol displayed by her on Monday night, it is no wonder that the judges have treated me so badly. The whole system is rigged, and companies are leaving because of it. All right, so I had mentioned this earlier. David Horsani has a piece that says, is this exhausting? I guess we can ask Ken. Is this exhausting, overlong Democratic convention convincing any voters? If a person were forced to pick one word to describe the third night of the Democratic National Committee, it would probably be exhausting. It was nearly 11 p.m., 3 hours into the primetime portion of the day, when our Secretary of Transportation, Pete Buttigieg, finally hit the DNC stage. Now, I'm not a professional political advisor, but one highly doubts that voters, most of whom would be waking up for work on Thursday, were clamoring to hear from the bungling head of the least important bureaucracy in the country. Mayor Pete had just followed the governor of Maryland, Wes Moore, though both men hit nearly the exact same themes that scores of other Democrat speakers had already gone over. Surely Buttigieg was going to introduce vice presidential candidate Tim Walz next and put us out of our misery. Nope. Welcome John Legend and Sheila E. So now the nightmare was coming to an end, said David Horsani. Nope. Welcome John Legend. Next up, to my chagrin, was Minnesota Senator Amy Klobuchar. This time, you could really feel the buildup. All signs pointing to Walz's big moment. Well, except from the Minnesota High School Marching Band and former high school football players coached by Walz. And also a movie narrated by Walz's wife glorifying his life. It often seemed as if the entire point of the DNC was to shove as many Democrats in front of the camera during prime time as humanly possible. Cory Booker and Stevie Wonder and Mindy Kaling, Nancy Pelosi and Bill Clinton, and scores of lesser-known politicians and activists and law enforcement officials all made forgettable appearances. The sharpness of the Democrats' message was blunted with every new speaker. These events had become a grind. This is very similar to what Ken did say, actually. Anyway, I began to wonder if the Democrats were going to push their vice presidential nominee speech into the midnight hour as they had done to Biden. But Walz appeared shortly before 11:30. The candidate delivered a short, loud speech imbued with his everyman shtick and attack dog persona. Was it good? I'm not sure. Frankly, at that point, like most Americans, I could barely keep my eyes open. There's also a piece before we go to break. We don't have time for it, but it's by Rich Lowry. I would highly recommend at New York Post. Chuck Schumer potentially eliminating the filibuster, which is something that he's been promising, is the key to a radical agenda. Schumer already says he wants another massive climate bill and waves away any criticism about the national debt. If Schumer were to prevail in the filibuster, the nature of one institution, the Senate, would be fundamentally changed in order to make it possible to fundamentally change others. This would be a naked power play. It would trample norms and centralize power in Washington in an unprecedented way for progressive ends. The best thing to be said for it is that we've been warned. Let's take our final break as we wrap up today's edition of Frankly Speaking. We'll be right back. And we are back, wrapping up today's edition of Frankly Speaking, broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio. Buckle in. Here we go. There's a piece at the New York Post. Kamala Harris's bail fund endorsement, if you recall that at the time, helped put killer and rapist back on the street to offend again in the name of social justice. It's about an 11-page piece you can find at the New York Post. Did you see that the Commerce Secretary, President Biden's Secretary of Commerce, Gina Raimondo, admitted that she was not familiar with the day's major revision to the job numbers. I'm sure you heard about the revision to the job numbers. ABC News correspondent Kenya Whitword tried to get a reaction on these new statistics. I'm curious as to your thoughts on today. The Bureau of Labor saying that more than 800,000 fewer jobs were actually created than initially reported. 800,000, folks. The reporter played a clip of former President Trump talking about the report at a North Carolina rally. The administration padded the numbers with an extra, listen to this one, 318,000 jobs that didn't exist. So they said they existed and they never existed. They built them up so they could say what a wonderful job they're doing, Trump said. Well, that's when Raimondo appears to dismiss the news as Trump spreading misinformation. She said, no, when I hear that, first of all, I don't believe it because I've never heard Donald Trump say anything truthful. That's when Whitmore, not wanting to stump the Secretary of Commerce, says it's from the Bureau of Labor. She then has to admit, I'm not familiar with that. Does that give you confidence in the bureaucracy that is the Secretary of Commerce and her job as the Secretary of Commerce? Because Trump said it, she's not familiar with it. It's not true. By the way, Trump ventured yesterday outside of the new bulletproof encasement to embrace a supporter who had been overcome by heat at that North Carolina rally. One last comment from a viewer before we go. Great show, Frank. Thank you. I'll take that one on the way out the door. Thanks again to Don Burlew for being our guest this morning from Watkins Glen International. And tomorrow, Assemblyman Phil Palmisano and guests from Sweeney Todd that is opening tomorrow with Elmira Little Theater. Get your questions in ahead of time if you don't mind. Also, keep in mind you're going to have to tune in right at 6 because we've got a lot to cover when we don't have guests tomorrow because we're going to be talking about Harris's speech tonight. So tune in every weekday morning starting at 6 for Frankly Speaking, only on WYDC TV. Big Fox. Have a great day, everyone. We'll see you tomorrow morning, bright and early. I look forward to it already.